home. My husband and I live here. And I want to welcome everybody to this event. Just a brief context. My daughter-in-law, right here, Keena Batti, introduced me to not only this organization, but also educated me as to, and the irony is I don't actually need a mic, but I'm going to use it. But advocacy and work in women's health care is very important to me and very personal. When I found out that my daughter-in-law was dealing with this very situation, I said, I want to know more about it. And she has introduced me to the amazing work that they're doing. I also want to say that we are ambassadors. We're kind of ground zero as women's health care becomes less and less of a priority in our current situation. I think we have to take it upon ourselves to not only become educated, informed, but talk about it. Talk about it to our daughters, talk about it to persons with vaginas, and talk about it. But we and everybody who's here today really should begin to see themselves as an ambassador and an advocate. So I just want to thank you all for braving the heat. There's plenty of food, plenty of drinks. And again, anytime during the program, you can walk in through the doors and please help yourself. I'm going to turn this over to my daughter-in-law, Keena Batti. Thank you so much.
Nina Tassler. Hi, my name is Keena. I'm Nina's daughter-in-law, as you all heard, and I'm a member of Tight Lipped. Thank you all for being here today. We're so excited to have you this afternoon to talk to you all about vulvovaginal pain. Firstly, I just want to thank Nina and Jerry. Where's Jerry? My father-in-law. Oh, he's inside. For hosting today's event. It's a rare thing to be able to talk to your friends and family about what is unfortunately still an incredibly taboo topic, but I think to be able to talk to your in-laws is particularly unheard of. I'm incredibly grateful to them for their openness to learn about my own struggles with vulvovaginal pain. So thank you, Jerry. Our host, Nina, has been a long-time champion for women's health. I think it's one of the reasons why we first clicked so quickly. Nina has been a vocal and outspoken advocate about issues like reproductive justice, abortion access, and the ways that women's health is still underfunded, under-researched, and not taken seriously. I want to start today by sharing a bit about my own experience, and just to warn the uninitiated here, I'm going to be talking about my vagina for a lot. A couple of minutes here. My family's back there. Hey, Mom and Dad. Totally normal. So let's get into it. So in 2019, I developed what I thought was a UTI. I had debilitating pain in my pelvis and vulva that was making life nearly unlivable. Every doctor I saw said that it was just a regular UTI, but seemingly overnight, this UTI kept me from being able to use tampons, wear pants, or drive home without stopping multiple times to pee. Before I continue, could I please see by a show of hands who here has had a UTI before, right? Yeah, crazy. We might even have some men raising their hands too. My dog currently has a UTI, so it's a problem. So if you could humor me, just close your eyes for a minute and try to remember what it felt like to have that UTI. An ache in your lower abdomen, the constant tingling sensation that keeps you from being able to focus on anything, finally deciding you're going to try to pee and maybe a drop or two comes out and it burns like fire and then you clench your pelvic floor muscles in a knee-jerk reaction. Did you want to leave the house when this was happening? Were you able to sleep? Was it easy to work or take care of your kids? You can open your eyes now if they're closed. That's how I felt, but for 3 months straight. Not a single second of relief. And I started to think it might never get better. I felt like I was losing my sanity. I was constantly anxious that I would be fired from my job, and not being able to wear normal clothes or walk my dog or exercise or have sex made me feel like my sense of identity had been stolen from me without any warning. But my doctors had no answers for me other than take antibiotics. And in fact, I took so many rounds of antibiotics that I developed allergies to them. Because I take immunosuppressants for an autoimmune disease, developing an allergy to antibiotics has profound lifelong implications because I'm extra susceptible to infections. Eventually, by a stroke of luck, I found a urologist and sexual medicine specialist, Dr. Gonzalez right here, who diagnosed me with something called hormonally mediated vulvodynia. Quite the mouthful. He told me that my oral contraceptives, yes, the birth control pill that I had been taking since I was 19, had created a hormonal deficiency. Am I getting this right? Yeah. This caused my tissues to become thin and damaged, leading to all of my pain symptoms. When he showed me with a mirror, my tissue was red, inflamed, and angry. And when he touched it with a Q-tip, it felt like he was dragging the tip of a knife across my flesh. I was shocked. None of the gynecologists I had seen had told me that there was a vulvovaginal pain condition that closely mimicked a UTI, and that there was a simple process to diagnosis for just the cost of a Q-tip. And unfortunately, this wasn't the first time I struggled to find a diagnosis. When I started to experience severe vulvar itching, I suspected I might have a skin condition called lichen sclerosis. When I went to my gynecologist to ask for a biopsy to confirm my suspicions, she refused to even examine me. And her reason for refusal? I was too young. But I was not too young. The idea that only menopausal women can have lichen sclerosis is old and outdated information. And luckily, because of my privilege and my access, I was able to find a gynecologist in my area who recognized the symptoms of lichen and properly diagnosed me. So great. I figured it out. But I couldn't shake the feeling of how deeply unfair this all was. How many people were going to their gynecologist with itching and burning and tearing and getting dismissed based on old data? Why was it so hard to find basic, trusted information about these conditions? And if it was a struggle for me, with all of my privilege, what about everyone else? I was fired up and I wanted to do something about it. So I considered going back to school to get a master's in public health, and I called UCLA to learn more about their program. I told them specifically I was interested in getting my MPH because of all of my experiences with vulvovaginal pain, and I asked, is there a career path in this? But they had no idea what I was talking about. I got off the call feeling like it was an impossible task to try to improve care for patients like me. Little did I know I was actually onto something, though, because shortly after, I happened to see a post on Instagram from a group called Tight-Lipped that was happening in LA that night. And it was for a group of patients with vulvovaginal pain because these conditions are so common. I thought about going, but I was packing up my entire apartment to move into our first house, and it just felt like it was not the night to go. Like my whole life was in boxes. But my wonderful, supportive husband, Matt, I don't know where he is, but he deserves a round of applause. He was like, I got this. I'll pack the rest of the apartment and you should go, because he had seen me firsthand feel isolated and alone, and he thought it would be helpful for me to connect with other patients going through the same experiences. I'm so grateful that he encouraged me to go, because that decision has changed my life in ways I couldn't have imagined. At the event that night, I met people of all ages sharing stories that sounded exactly like mine. There was a 19-year-old who drove all the way from San Diego, a woman in her 40s who had been dealing with this for decades. There were multiple people who had avoided getting pap smears for years because the pain was intolerable. It was validating to realize that all of us, a group of complete strangers sitting around talking about our vaginas, just like this, one-on-one, we're dealing with the same obstacles and problems. But it was also upsetting. Why were all of the things I'd gone through so common? We'd seen doctors who didn't know what was wrong with us, been on trial and error medications that didn't help, and had painful and unnecessary procedures. We were being massively gaslit instead of diagnosed and treated. And this lack of care has life-altering consequences. Our careers often become stagnant because our pain greatly limits what we can do. We spend tens of thousands of dollars on expensive treatments that aren't covered by insurance. Sorry, that's a separate issue. This affects our abilities to start families, or buy a home, or have healthy romantic relationships, or reach any of the milestones of adulthood. Our mental health is pushed to its limit as we are dubbed hysterical by our medical providers. Unfortunately, it's not surprising that patients are having such similar experiences. In one study at the University of Minnesota, over a third of patients with vulvodynia went to more than 15 doctor's appointments before receiving a diagnosis. 15. I'll get real close to the mic for that. Just think about that for a second. How much time, energy, and money, how many sick leave requests you're putting in and missing obligations and juggling your schedule to go to 15 doctor's appointments for the same exact thing. And of course, most patients don't even have the luxury to do that. Up to half of patients who seek treatment for vulvar pain are never able to get a diagnosis at all. This has gone on for far too long, and it's time to fight for change. Tight-Lipped is the only grassroots organization dedicated to addressing long-standing obstacles to care. Stigma and shame have kept vulvovaginal pain patients quiet about our symptoms and our struggles, but we don't want to keep our experiences secret anymore. So, how is Tight-Lipped addressing the problem? Our 5 chapters around the country, including one here in LA, are focused on advocating for change, starting with closing the gaps in OBGYN education. Okay, I'm going to tell you something, and I don't want you to be too shocked. Is everyone sitting down? You guys might want to just snap. So here goes. OBGYN training in the United States, this United States, in the year 2025, does not include education on common vulvovaginal pain conditions. All of the stuff I've just been talking about, lichen sclerosis, hormonally mediated vulvodynia, none of it is in the curriculum, and it's not a requirement for our doctors to learn about. That's not good. This is a solvable problem, and we, the patients, are leading the change. Go on forever. So Tight-Lipped launched a campaign calling on teaching hospitals around the country to incorporate training on vulvovaginal pain. Tight-Lipped members, the people here that are, helping you find your seat, we are the ones doing the work. And we're trying to bring this education to OBGYN residency programs to get these conditions added to the curriculum. 1 in 4 women and people with vulvas will experience pelvic pain in their lifetime. 1 in 4. We should do the math of this room and divide that by 4. Even if you take the Tight-Lipped members out, that's still a lot of people. 1 in 4 means that there's simply no excuse. Luckily, we're in this campaign together with incredible medical specialists who do take us seriously and are leading experts in vulvovaginal pain. We're lucky to have many of them here today. I want to recognize all of the medical providers who are working with us every day to change the landscape of treatment for vulvovaginal pain. So if you're on Tight-Lipped's Medical Advisory Board or Speakers Bureau, could you please stand up? Thank you, guys. As you can see, there are incredible providers and patients here today who are working around the clock to change the current reality. If you take one thing away from today, let it be this. I promise you that you know someone, if not many, many people with vulvovaginal pain. And I can promise you that they are not finding care easily, if at all. So in a moment, we're going to have a chance to hear another personal story and from our incredible medical experts on our panel sitting behind me. I want to ask that you take this time to learn all you can and think about what you can do to break the silence and help us fight for better care. And with that, I am thrilled to give the floor to producer and actor Corinne Foxx, who is an incredible advocate for the endometriosis and pelvic pain community.
I have so many doctors in the world that I have seen personally. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. First and foremost, I want to thank Tight-Lipped for all of the incredible work that you're doing. These type of conversations just aren't happening. And so the fact that you've fostered and facilitated this conversation is so important. So let's give a round of applause to Tight-Lipped. And to Nina Tassler for having us here at her beautiful home. Also, when I walked in, I saw my wedding planners. This is my home. These are my people. But so I'm Corinne Foxx. If you guys don't know me, I'm an actor, I'm a host, but I think most importantly, I'm someone who lives with endometriosis. I was diagnosed in 2018 with endometriosis, but my journey started way, way before that, probably at my first period. I was a nauseous child. I was a child who was always in pain, and loved my parents, but I don't think they really knew what was wrong with me. They kind of thought maybe I was overdramatic. I'm an actor. I don't know. Come to find out, years later, when I was around 23, my period started to become debilitating. I couldn't get up for work. I couldn't show up in the way in the world that I wanted to. I was having stabbing pains. You guys know this. Stabbing pains. I was having a lot of urinary symptoms. I swear I was with you. I was having frequency, urgency, painful bowel movements, pain with sex. The list goes on and on. But for me, because of the way our education system is, I thought all that was normal. When I learned about human development and women's health, it was, well, it's going to be painful, it's going to hurt. And so I kind of just took it, this is what womanhood is. And it wasn't until my periods were getting really, really bad and I was curled up on my bathroom floor that my roommate walked in and she said, "Corinne, this is not normal." And I was genuinely shocked because I had been sold this narrative that this is what it was. This is what it meant to be. This is what it was meant to be, a woman. And that moment led me on a months-long journey from doctors to doctors to doctors to try to figure out what was going on. And that journey started at my normal OBGYN, the one that my mom went to. And she didn't have answers for me. She said, "I don't know what this is. It might be the C word, which has been floated around a few times in my medical journey, cancer. And it's terrifying." So I went to different doctors. I wasn't feeling like I was getting any solutions. And that led me to my diagnosis, which was a very unfortunate day for me because I walked into a new OBGYN's office. It was a man, and he was doing my intake, and he had made a comment to me. He asked me if I had a consistent partner. I said yes. At the time, I had a boyfriend. I said, "Yeah, I have a boyfriend." And he had suggested that maybe I needed to change who my partner was. And kind of gave me a look. And when you're a patient and you're in that kind of position with somebody of authority, you don't know what to say and you don't know what to do. And so that was the doctor that actually mentioned endometriosis, but in a very casual, very nonchalant way with no information, and said you can schedule your surgery at the front desk. And I said, "What surgery? What are you talking about?" And so the little bit of research I was able to do on my phone, I saw that maybe it's a hysterectomy. Maybe that's what I'm getting. Maybe I'm 23 and I'm going to be infertile. And that led me to message boards. That led me to Facebook groups to start learning about what endometriosis was. And I was able to realize I did need a hysterectomy. And that led me to Dr. Iris Orbuck, who I don't think is here today, but I'm sure many people have worked with. She's an incredible surgeon, and she was able to give me all of the information about endometriosis and said, "There's a lot of options for you here." And that was when October 2018, I had my first surgery for endometriosis, and she was able to preserve all of my reproductive organs. And that moment after I had my surgery, I was like, I need to be talking about this. I need to be sharing my story with people because I am not alone. And I felt very alone, but I knew there were more people out there. And so I started working with the Endometriosis Foundation of America, and they're doing such incredible work in research and practitioners and all of that. And I realized that once I started sharing my story online, I was flooded with people commenting back saying, "Oh my gosh, I have this, I have that, I have this." And I was like, wow, there is such a need for this conversation publicly. People want to be talking about it. You just have to start it. You just have to start that fire. So that's why I think it's so great what Tight-Lipped is doing in this conversation today, because people want answers. People are living in chronic pain. I really relate to what you said with the urinary symptoms. That's my endometriosis. It loves my bladder. That's just where it hangs out. I had my last surgery in October in 2024, and I had 5 endometriomas in my bladder. And it was the same symptoms. And so I think talking about that, even me just hearing your story, I'm like, oh, wow, I've had that experience before. So I think these conversations today are so important. And another thing I want to talk about is I've been able to have 2 surgeries now, but those surgeries are paid for out of pocket. I am, incredibly blessed, and I am able to afford care. And it's not just the surgery. It's, the pelvic physical therapy. It's the nutritionist. It's this and that. This is an expensive lifestyle, you guys. And I think there's so much to be done in making sure that this type of care is affordable and accessible to people. And I know that big insurance companies, there's a lot they can be doing, and there's a lot of pressure we can be putting on them to make sure that everyday people can have access to this, not just the people that can afford the fancy doctors. And I have all the time in the world to go do all these, crazy different experimental modalities. And so I think it's really important that we advocate for better healthcare in general, and put pressure on our government. And so that all being said, I'm so honored to be here. I think it's such incredible work that Tight-Lipped is doing. It's an honor, and I've kind of vowed my life to now just talking about painful pelvic pain. And so, yeah, I'm honored to be here, and thank you guys for having me.
Thank you, Corinne. Well, we got to get my sister-in-law to start your TikTok. She's 26, and you can do that. Okay, so I'm going to pass it over to Rachel, and please give her a round of applause.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, this is such an honor. I came all the way from Washington, D.C. I'm a urologist. We've got a lot of crooked dicks in Washington, D.C. And I am so happy to be here today with all of you. I feel like this is a little bit like a wedding, right? All the people you love who you want to deeply connect to, but you get about 30 seconds of time with. So this is an incredible honor. And I will tell you, pelvic pain, thank you. Pelvic pain is this universal thing that happens to people with pelvises, and there are a lot of people with pelvises. And it's true that this is unfortunately a situation where there's a lot of equity. We're all equals here. You can be Halle Berry, who gets told she has herpes, but actually has genitourinary syndrome of menopause. You could be Meghan Trainor, who gets diagnosed with vaginismus and tight pelvic floor muscles. You can be a CEO that I have taken care of, who runs a $1 billion company and just doesn't have sex because it's always been painful, and it seems like too much work to cross the country to get an exam and actually get this figured out. So she just goes without sex, which is okay with her, which is, again, it's her choice. But it's truly equitable in that we're all getting really crappy care here. And so the reality is we struggle with a couple of things. And it's research, education, advocacy, and mentorship. Those are not small things, but that's what we're struggling here. And the tragedy here is, yes, we're behind. As urologists, and there are many urologists in the room, which I'm so honored that they're really helping. You have giants in the field, in this room, who are really trying to pave the way with our OBGYN colleagues and our other medical colleagues, our pelvic floor physical therapists, our sex therapists, our GI doctors. We have so many people who work in the pelvis, and just thank you for what you all do every single day. And you all know that we're 30 years behind we are with some of the things that we know for men, right? We have a leader here who helped to create Viagra and Cialis for men, right? And that was like more than 20 years ago. We've got a lot of work to do when it comes to helping women's health. But the challenge is we're not even doing the things that we already know. We have so much knowledge about hormones, about pelvic floors, about nerves, about muscles that we are not adequately using, and it's not getting through to medical education. And that's what so many of us are doing. And that's where Tight-Lipped has said, we're rolling up our sleeves and we're going to do the work ourselves. And so why aren't we doing it? What is the tragedy, right? It's the 10-minute visit. It's the gaslighting that you just heard about. It's the silent struggle that we don't talk about. We don't even know the word vulva or vestibule. We call it a vagina, and most of you don't have vagina problems. You have vulvar problems, right? And that's a huge problem, that we don't even have the language to really talk about these problems. And we lack the need for this multidisciplinary care and the biopsychosocial care. The biopsychosocial care. Hello. Is the airplane hurting this one? Testing. I can stand up and get loud. Is that what okay. That one's on. Hello. The biopsychosocial care that we all need to feel connected and optimize our health and our quality of life. And so I just want to say that Tight-Lipped is my favorite. They are my favorite because when my patients come to see me and they are angry and they are defeated and they are hopeless and they are so mad that they had to see 20 doctors and they had to get on an airplane to come see me. And when I tell them that actually the problem can probably be solved with a little bit of topical creams and pelvic floor physical therapy, maybe an injection or two, and very rarely surgery. And they say, and I tell them, I get their anger and I turn it into advocacy. I say, I know you're mad. I'm mad with you. But there's a group that we work with that is going to take this anger and we're going to do change. Mm-hmm. And we're going to go door to door into residency programs, into doctors' offices, and we're going to teach them ourselves. You didn't know how to examine my vulva. Well, I'm going to teach you. And that is why I take a plane and come over here, because this work is so important. And Tight-Lipped, in a very short period of time, has completely transformed the way medical education is delivered, and watching them take massive action. I love massive action takers, you guys. It is like, it gives me the energy like you wouldn't believe, to watch people roll up their sleeves and do the work themselves. Mm-hmm. And so I am honored to take all of our rage, and we all have a lot of rage right now, and we turn it into action and advocacy. And there is so much that you can do to help us. And so I'm honored to introduce this absolutely incredible panel of my friends, my colleagues. So we're gonna talk to them one by one. We have Kayna Cassard, who is an amazing sex therapist. We've got Stephanie Prendergast, she looks young, my friends, but she has been the OG of pelvic floor physical therapy since before we all knew what a pelvis was. We have my fellowship sister. There are not very many, there are like 27 fellowships that do men's sexual health out there. There is one in the country that acknowledges women and men, and you're lucky there's about 5 of us here. 1, 2, 3. There's not enough, so we need more fellowships, we need more training opportunities, but you have a lot of people in this room who have dedicated their lives to doing this. So Maria Uloko is a urologist, sexual medicine fellowship trained doctor, and a friend, just such a dear friend. And then you have the person who started it all, Noah, the director of Tight-Lipped, my dear friend and mentor of mine, and has taught me so much about what it means to grassroots, roll up your sleeves, and do the work. So I want to start our panel off, and we're going to see how our microphones work here. And I want to see every single day and how these conditions, whether it's how do you help get people to the endometriosis, the vulvodynia diagnosis, the different pelvic floor disorders, how do you in the exam room make such a change, and how do people get to you?
Well, thank you for that introduction. I might need your microphone. Thank you. So when people start to have irritated bladder symptoms, or painful sex, or sex that maybe felt uncomfortable and then they burn for 4 hours after, nobody thinks, let me call a physical therapist and check on that. Pretty sure no. But the symptoms of pelvic floor dysfunction overlap with some of the urogynecologic and colorectal reasons that we are here today. And my role is always a token PT at events like this. And I'm so happy to play that role because I've been treating pelvic pain disorders for 25 years. There is something different about pelvic floor anatomy that everybody should understand. There are voluntary and involuntary actions that control our urinary bowel, sexual pleasure, and all the functions that we can do. It's also part of our core. But when symptoms start to arise, and what we're talking about with tight-lipped, it can be clitoral pain, vulvovaginal pain, perineal pain, pain when you have a bowel movement. It feels like you have a UTI and you don't. It's the only space where someone's like, oh, I wish I had chlamydia instead of this burning because it's treatable. Whereas every physician that tight-lipped is trying to educate for and what goes through the residency programs, they do not understand this overlapping anatomy and neurology that goes with the pelvic floor and some of these issues. And again, no one thinks about fascia and muscles, but that's part of it. So I just want to list some of the symptoms and diagnoses before we get into the panel. Irritated bladder symptoms. It feels like menopause, but these people are 20 or 18. They may have painful periods right before their period. They may have a lot of irritated bladder symptoms. People try to be sexually active or use a tampon and they can't. They have a bowel movement and their clitoris hurts. All of these things sound ridiculous to everyone except for those of us in this room who are working really hard to make it normal. So you can imagine being confronted with these symptoms and going to various places and just being told, oh, well, you don't have the UTI. Oh, you don't have the STI. But then what is it? So that's where the intersection of physical therapy and coordinated interdisciplinary care can come to help these patients. And I feel, and it was my upbringing 25 years ago, it's an intersection of medical management and pelvic floor physical therapy. The diagnoses that I may not have said yet are vulvodynia, vestibulodynia, interstitial cystitis, and men it's chronic pelvic pain syndrome. Pudendal neuralgia is a rub. Persistent genital arousal disorder. All of these things are things that every primary care, urologic, gynecologic, and colorectal person are going to see. And depending on what the person says to the provider is going to depend on their diagnosis. This is why the interdisciplinary crew is so important, and so many people in my village and what Tight-Lipped is doing is bringing us together, because if you go to the gynecologist and say you can't have sex, you're going to get a different diagnosis than when you go to the urologist and say I had to pee 17 times in the last 4 hours. What if it's the same thing? And what if the people in this room and the work that's going can get it better organized so people aren't suffering like this?
Here today is the greatest human on earth, and just thank you for existing and doing this and showing up today. And your patients are so incredibly lucky. It is unreal how lucky they are, but we cannot take care of half the population. We can't do it as much as we want to. And so the challenge is that our patients are showing up and they're being told, instead of what I wish was said to them as, I don't know, but I know that there are people doing this and I'm going to refer you, which is always acceptable to say. I get more and more famous the more I tell people, well, I don't actually know, or we don't have data for that, or the science doesn't exist yet. It turns out it's okay not to know and to do the work to fight to figure it out. That's why we do research. But unfortunately, what happens so often, and we've all experienced this, is doctors minimize your experience. The new word, the gaslight word that you hear all too often now, but this idea of they minimize to say it's all in your head. Have a glass of wine. Maybe it's your partner. I mean, you hear celebrities just now who are minimized and gaslit and have awful traumatic experience. Medical trauma is so common. Dr. Uloko, can you speak about that a little and taken on so much of that trauma in the exam room?
Hello everyone. Trauma, what a fun conversation. So one of the things I think about with medical gaslighting, it's a really unique thing in terms of, I'm going to kind of reframe it in a way. Medical gaslighting for a lot of physicians is you don't know what you don't know. And I think a lot of physicians, as they go through the medical education system, there's kind of a written contract, right? I have taken all these tests. I have paid all this money so that I am going to get a medical degree that's going to make sure that I can help and treat patients when I leave. The thing is, you actually don't get a lot of that education when it comes to women and women's bodies and vulvas and vulvar anatomy. And so then you're in practice and you're saying, wow, I know everything. I've taken all the boards. I've taken all the exams. I should know everything. And then the first person comes in with pelvic pain and you say, well, that's a you problem because that was anywhere in my curriculum. And then you're going to see the second patient, then the third patient, then the fourth patient, then the fifth patient. And you're consistently going to just say, wow, never heard of it, must be a you thing. And I think that really all of this really stems from the lack of education, the lack of a comprehensive education around vulvar anatomy, physiology, pathophys, and then also diagnosis and treatment. We did a study that showed 75% of current medical trainees are actually leaving medical school and residency without knowing basic vulvar anatomy, how then those parts work, how then to then utilize those parts to make a diagnosis, how to even get to a diagnosis, and then how to treat. So this is the workforce that we're currently working with. And if you're a patient who doesn't have the resources, there's this inherent trust with your doctor, especially women. We're socially conditioned to be good girls and to just trust and believe what the system tells us. And so now you're going to that system that actually didn't learn anything about you. You know something's wrong, but now the person with authority is telling you there's nothing wrong with you. And one of the coolest things and one of the most impactful things, what I love about Tight-Lipped, is that these are a group of people that were told there is nothing wrong with you and trusted their intuition and said, no, there is, and continued to fight, because that fight is really, really exhausting. I've seen over 2,000 patients. I built one of the first vulvar clinics in the United States that openly saw insurance with the urologic training that we have. And almost every single one of my patients would sob when I said, I know what you have. I believe you. And those tears are why we do what we do. In a perfect world, we will have people experiencing symptoms, go to the doctor, they get diagnosed, they get treated. They're no longer told that their conditions are chronic. Most of these conditions aren't chronic, they're just misdiagnosed. And if we can actually mass train physicians and then also make sure that we're mass training the patients on the other side of it so that the patients can be their own biggest advocates in the healthcare system.
I understand why these are all my friends, why I come all the way across the country to just spend time with them. When my patients, I think it's so important, this idea of biopsychosocial. There's so much biology that we minimize, and when you give people information about how their bodies work, they make excellent healthcare decisions for themselves. Truly excellent. I've never seen someone make a bad decision for themselves of when they learn how their bodies work and what's happening. And when patients come to see me, there is almost always a biological reason for what is going on with them. And I like to remind them that their brain is a part of their biology. It's a very strong part of their biology, and you cannot separate your brain and your body. And when I tell them about the hormones or the muscle problems or the nerve problems that are affecting their pelvises, I also say this is not in your head, but my God, what it has done to your head, all of this time not knowing, what it's done to your relationships, what it's done to your self-esteem, what it's done to your ability to trust your own body, it really does a number on you. And so we love our colleagues, and I want to hear from our amazing Kayna, who's a sex therapist who really works with people with sexual pain conditions. So why don't you talk to us?
Thank you so much. It is really incredible to be here as a sex therapist, and leaning over here. It's just close to that. There we go. So as a sex therapist and a former pelvic pain patient, my journey started 2 decades ago, and I needed this so badly, but nothing was out there, and it took 8 years for me to get the diagnosis. And when I was also on my journey to become a sex therapist, I dove into the textbooks because I was like, there has to be something here. I want to have sex. It sounds fun. Everyone told me it's going to be a fun thing. It's not so fun for me. I went in through all of my sex therapy texts, and there was one chapter, and it said, strap in, this is going to be a long journey, it's probably not going to get better. And I thought, that can't be right, because I've never heard of this. Nobody ever told me except to normalize, oh yeah, the first time it hurts. And that is not how it should be. I realized that having an awareness around the mind-body connection is really important, and understanding for patients who have been on journeys of not only their bodies feeling like it's betraying them, or maybe the medical system's betraying them, but also realizing that they're not having the kind of experiences that are plastered in the movies, that their friends are talking about, that their partners are probably expecting and hoping, and that they are also expecting and hoping that they would be able to live this life that has an experience of pleasure in it. But instead of pleasure, it is just riddled with shame. It's this emotional, mental, relational burden that my clients, and I felt myself as well, walked through that experience feeling like they were broken, not just sexually, not just physically, but just as people. You heard from both Corinne and Keena that, and their experience is not unusual, that in so many ways their lives were held back. My clients will talk about how they hold off on dating. They don't want to enter into a romantic relationship because they're afraid of having to have the sex talk of like, oh, by the way, that thing that you're probably hoping we would get to, it's kind of complicated and it hurts me. And actually, and maybe they don't even have the words for this, but actually I'm terrified of this thing that everybody else in the world seems to have pleasure with. And what's happening on a psychological, body-based level is people they're bracing when it comes to sex. They're bracing when it comes to gynecological exams or PT. Their nervous system has constantly detected that anything to do with their vulva, their pelvis, sex, intimacy, if a partner just wants to come and touch or give them a little kiss, all of that is linked to a brain pathway that says, danger, do not go there, absolutely not. And then it shuts down the sexual arousal system. Or if the muscle's already tight, as Stephanie mentioned, that sexual pleasure requires pelvic floor muscles to be open and loose so blood flow can move through so that they can get aroused, so that they can have clitoral erections, so they can have penile erections. And that's not happening because threat and danger has just been interwoven into this concept of sex, into the concept of pleasure, into the concept of intimacy. Just holding hands can trigger that trauma pathway. And what I've seen is that a lot of clients have very similar responses in their bodies and in their cognitions, their thoughts, their behaviors, as someone who's been diagnosed with PTSD. The diagnostic manuals, they have a very small exclusion that says if it's not related to a medical condition, it cannot be defined as PTSD. Let me tell you, our bodies do not read the DSM. They're not looking at the ICD-11. They're not saying, oh, well, I don't have PTSD because there's this exclusionary factor to it. Their bodies are saying there's something wrong and I need to figure out why I can't do the things that I see everybody else doing or that I'm assuming everybody else doing. Unless, I guess, they're at sex parties. Maybe they're seeing it happen for all these people. Which, support that, absolutely. Exposure therapy, intense. So when they have this experience of life where they're wanting to date, they want to family plan, they want to just experience pleasure, they want to touch their bodies without feeling everything else that they've been dealing with for years, maybe decades, the entire system is identifying this experience as a threat. And so trauma-informed care is incredibly important in this process because not only are they experiencing everything I just described, but also medical gaslighting, which ends up creating this lack of trust in themselves, in the medical system. And then that continues to amplify this lack of body trust, this lack of awareness and empowerment. And it's particularly important that we also look at and understand the impact this is also having on BIPOC, LGBTQ, and neurodivergent clients who are already navigating stigma in the healthcare system. And so this is a whole system challenge that we're being faced with. And as medical providers, as patients, having to advocate for trauma-informed care from all medical professionals, regardless of whether it's pelvic pain or not, but also and definitely for dealing with challenges of vulvovaginal conditions, it's really, really important, because otherwise the diagnoses get delayed, the quality of life, mental health declines, physical health declines, and people just put their lives on hold. And so it's really important that we're bringing this awareness into the process of the medical field and creating the interdisciplinary approach that brings in trauma-informed care, so that we can stop asking, is this pain real? But we can start asking, what kind of support does this person actually need? And how can I, as a provider or a partner or just a friend, help that person get that? Because there's so much they're already like having to hold on to that that is a place that they need, we need extra support in.
Fellowship training in sexual medicine, and I tried to work for a big insurance-based urology practice, and I had a contract in hand. I was home with a NICU baby, and they called me up. The head of the private equity, owner of the private equity firm, called me up. He said, "We are taking this contract away. You are not going to make us enough money fast enough. What you do is weird." And he wasn't wrong. And it's true. Because I believe that what people need is they need connection, they need a really good history, and they need a damn good physical exam with a mirror that they understand what's going on with their bodies, and they need education. And actually, we can save the healthcare system a whole lot of money when you do that upfront time with someone, and they don't need those millions of CT scans and MRIs and all of those expensive procedures. When you can get a good sex detective, which is what I call myself, I'm a sex detective, when you can get a detective that can really go through it and understand what's going on with them. But I didn't learn any of this in my urology training, my OBGYN colleagues. The word clitoris doesn't even appear once in their rubric of what they have to know. I'm a urologist. Can you imagine if the word penis was nowhere in my curriculum of what I needed to know? Or if I was told, oh, you don't want to examine the penis, you don't want to make the man uncomfortable. We are taught not to examine a clitoris. Nobody is taught how to do a vulvar exam. Again, I had to start my own medical practice because what I wanted to do did not exist. And so about almost 4 years ago now, I started my own medical practice. And in 2022, the New York Times came out with this giant, beautiful, wonderful article that said, half the world has a clitoris. Why don't doctors study it? And it was a full page in the science section. It was science in 2022 that we give women a mirror and we say, this is your labia majora. This is your labia minora, this is your vulvar vestibule, this is your pelvic floor, this is your clitoris. And that was science and innovative in 2022. Not only that, it was the most shared article of the year. Why? And the New York Times didn't want to run it. They said, this isn't interesting to our readers. And then it was the most shared article of the year. So we have gaps because the people are starting to go to their doctors with questions, because we on Instagram are very loud, and you should follow all of these people on Instagram. You can learn more about sexual medicine on Instagram than you can doing a 4 or 5 year residency program. And so I had to start my own practice. And again, we have gotten so busy that now I have a whole LA chapter of my practice. Thank you to my 2 doctors here, who is because people want connection. They want to be taken care of, and they want to work with their doctor to get that help. And we see this in the menopause space as well. When it comes to, we forgot to teach doctors how to do hormone therapy, right? Every doctor who knew how to do hormone therapy is now retiring, and there is an entire generation of doctors who were never taught how to do this. We are living in a nightmare. But I am hopeful, and I am so excited because of the work and the patient advocacy and the grassroots work to actually make change. So I want Noah to talk about, what does that change look like? The strategy sessions that we have, the real work. It's not just talking, it's the actions that have taken place already in just a very short period of time. So show us what change looks like.
Can everyone hear me? I'm trying to change the direction of this mic so that maybe it's better. Okay. So for those of you who don't know, my name is Noah. I'm the executive director of Tight Lipped. And before we dive into what we're doing to solve all these many problems we just talked about, I want to just share just a tiny bit about my own experience and why I'm here. So, when I was in my early 20s, I decided it was finally time for me to go and get a pap smear and a pelvic exam. and I went to see my gynecologist in Chicago. I live in Chicago. And I went in, and she tried to do the exam. She tried to insert the speculum, and I was in so much pain that I literally jumped off the table and couldn't tolerate it. And she said, "Oh, you must be really nervous about your first exam. It's okay. We're going to give you some sedatives to calm you down, and then we're going to do the exam again." So then I avoided going back for many years because that sounded scary. And eventually I was like, all right, I'm going to do it. So I called up a friend. I had her drive me. I took the sedatives, and the same thing happened. She tried to do the exam, and I was still in the exact same amount of pain. I was like loopy and happier than I was the first time. I was like, this is fun, but I'm in a lot of pain. But it didn't change anything, and I wasn't able to get through with the exam. And the gynecologist said, "You know what? You didn't take enough of the sedatives. We need to put you under general anesthesia to do your pap smear." So I thought that sounded wild. And I wrote to my primary care doctor, and she said, "Why are you avoiding getting your pap smear?" So I went in, I took the day off work. I got to the hospital, and the nurses who put my IV in were like, "What are you here for again?" And I was like, "A pap smear." And I just felt everything about it felt kind of uncomfortable and embarrassing. Like, who goes under anesthesia for a pap smear? That's not heard of. But I did it because I really wanted to get a pap smear, like wild. But I was like, I can't wait to get a pap smear. And I went under anesthesia. And when I woke up, the gynecologist was like, "You did great. You got your pap smear. Time to go home. See you next year." And I was like, what? I just went under general anesthesia and spent the day at the hospital for an exam that people usually get done in the middle of their day and then go home again. And I'm in so much pain. I can't use tampons. I can't have penetrative sex. I can't do anything that involves any kind of insertion. Like, there's got to be something wrong. But she didn't have any answers. And she also didn't have any questions for me. She didn't ask me anything. She didn't do an exam to try to figure out where was the pain. She didn't ask, well, what could be causing this? And I just thought, you know what, like, this is a weird thing about me. This is a me problem, right? And that, you know, I would just suck it up and do it again next year. But over the course of time, I started getting angrier and angrier about what was going on and really struggling to try to find care. And I'm not going to tell the whole story of how that ended up leading me to start Tight-Lipped, but it turns out that I am one of many, many, many people who have experiences like this at the gynecologist. It's definitely not common to go under general anesthesia for a pap smear, but it is common to go to the gynecologist and have them not take your pain seriously and then be scared to go back for years and years or never go back. So that's what motivated me to start Tight-Lipped and then to start the campaign that we launched 2 years ago. So our campaign is focused on the gaps in OBGYN education, because OBGYNs, those are the vagina doctors, right? If something's wrong with your vagina, I didn't think to go see a urologist. I didn't think to see a pelvic floor physical therapist. I was like, I'm gonna go to my gynecologist. She's gonna tell me what's wrong. But unfortunately, that's not the case. And, you know, maybe we could excuse it if I lived in a OBGYN desert, but I live in Chicago, major metropolitan area with tons of hospitals and tons of teaching hospitals, and have yet to this day never been able to find an OBGYN in the entire city of Chicago who has been able to properly diagnose and treat me. Now, many years later, I have to travel out of state to get care. So that's unacceptable. I want to be the last person living in Chicago who has to travel out of the state to get care. I want to see every single person who shows up to their gynecologist in pain, get a comprehensive vulvar exam, get a conversation about what are all the many things that could be causing that pain, and then be told, here's what I think your diagnosis is, and let's figure out how to treat it. That's not complicated. Like, this is not really like super, like, I have no medical degree. I have no medical background. And from just listening to these amazing people speak every day, I feel like I kind of get what it is. Don't ask me to diagnose you, but like, I kind of could do it. Okay. Yeah. Don't hold me to it, but it's not that complicated. And so what we're doing with Tight-Lipped is we have a group of amazing volunteers, around the country. We have 5 chapters. LA chapter is incredible. You'll meet many, many of our volunteers here today. And what we are doing as patients is literally knocking on the doors of teaching hospitals, going to teaching hospitals saying, we want to see this in your OBGYN training curriculum. We want to see you provide this education and training to every OBGYN resident who walks through your doors so that when they graduate, we are able to see them as doctors. We don't have doctors who we can see in these cities. We want to be able to show up at any normal hospital, not to have to do years and years of our own research, to show up to the OBGYN, for that OBGYN to have learned the basics, right? They don't have to be an amazing expert in vulvovaginal pain. We want them to have learned the basics and how to diagnose and treat vulvovaginal pain to be able to diagnose and treat us. And so what we're doing as patients is approaching hospitals around the country. Many of the people here who you see wearing Ask Me Anything buttons have literally gone and shared their stories in front of rooms of OBGYNs, told their experiences, and talked to OBGYN residents about the importance of getting this education. And then once we get ourselves in the door, we invite those programs to bring speakers like Dr. Rachel Rubin, like Dr. Maria Uloko and Stephanie Prendergast to come and actually train their residents. Because unfortunately, most of the people at these programs, even if they're open to bringing that education in, they don't even know how to provide it themselves. We had a conversation with one of the top leading hospitals in the country in New York City, and we asked the residency program director, why aren't you providing this education? Like, we know this education is missing. You're not teaching people about vulvovaginal pain. Why aren't you providing it? And she said, she was very transparent. She said, we don't ask them to answer questions about that or examine them because we don't know what the correct answers would be. That's what the head of a residency program said to me at a major teaching hospital in New York City. She said, we don't teach this because I don't know how to evaluate whether they're giving us the right answers or not. And so they can't provide this education themselves. We've built a Speakers Bureau medical advisory board, and we say, okay, if you can't provide this education yourselves, we will direct you to the amazing experts and specialists who can provide it, because we as patients actually know who those people are. So that's the work that we're doing around the country. I'm going to pass it back over to Rachel Rubin, and you can hear a little bit more about what that looks like.
So in guerrilla style, door to door, knocking on doors, not taking no for an answer, and saying you must learn how to do this. And they have a couple of programs have answered the call. And the more we do this, the louder we are on social media, the more we create FOMO so that everybody wants to be cool like us, the more they will open their doors. And I tell you, the medical students are watching us. The residents are watching us, and they are changing the world rapidly. The world today is not the same place that it was even when I came out of training, 10 years ago. So I want Stephanie and Dr. Uloko, I want you to...
First and foremost, I always am blown away by how much work the Tight Lip crew does. Like, they essentially do a lot of what the residency program should be doing in terms of coordinating this care. So I will just always be blown away by that. Something that I love doing, I love teaching, I love educating. And it's really interesting when you're teaching and educating, you also have to talk about culture shift. Because yes, I can teach you anatomy, I can teach you like what can go wrong, what's healthy, what isn't healthy. But I also talk a lot about the cultural narrative around women suffering and pelvic pain and just suffering in general, because we have been socially conditioned to say that that's just normal. That's a normal experience in life. Also, the way that we talk about patients suffering can be so very callous. And so one of the things I try really hard to do when we're engaging with residents is to change the narrative that these patients aren't difficult. They're only difficult because we make it difficult for them. Like, our lack of education is not their problem. It's ours. It's our ignorance that we have to start addressing and looking hard at ourselves for. And that's really something that I try every day to, whenever I'm doing these teaching lessons, is to change the narrative around education and change the narrative around these patients, because they're my favorite patients to treat. Really, like, they're the best. And yeah, the other thing too is that although we are coming in and we are teaching and we are training and we've had really great success, it's oftentimes not enough. And there also needs to be more innovative, really innovative ideas on how we can expand this to the rest of the country and get these things to stick. Because in theory, gynecology was separate from OB. It used to be 4 years and 4 years and very separate training. And then all of a sudden they combined like a cumulative almost 11 years of training down to 4. And that means that basic gynecology isn't in their curriculum. And because of that, a 1-hour lecture can't change downstream things, but it can start opening minds because now they see what they don't know. And that's when they get really deeply curious. And so it's that culture change and opening the doors to being more exploratory.
Agree with all of that. So what it's been like for me, teaching for Tight Lipped, I was raised in an interdisciplinary community, as you've now heard multiple times. And what Tight Lipped has done is made it mandatory for people in residency to listen to a physical therapist. Yeah. So, I'm kind of used to the uphill battle. It's just part of my life. But I mean, a few times when I got into the room the first time, people aren't necessarily interested in hearing from me until I start describing the patient stories that every single one of them has seen when they are about 2 weeks away from being a doctor and didn't know what to do with. And the papers that you will see in your folders, I can teach an OBGYN how to do a pelvic floor exam in under 30 seconds. And we can also, based on Maria's work and the other work, subjectively identify who likely has a high tone pelvic floor disorder. And so when this happens, what was interesting to me, because I also do this for the International Society for the Study of Women's Sexual Health, watching people who are already surgeons, who are expertise in their field, have their hand shake when I tried to guide them into the models that Tight Lipped prepared at some of the residency programs, and how nervous their hands were to identify a levator ani, an obturator internus, or the urogenital triangle, or how to show them how to turn the speculum so it doesn't hit the urethra if they have vestibulodynia that they may be already identified, and how to get the speculum in and maybe not do a pap smear for the 18th time this year on somebody who isn't even sexually active, who just has pelvic pain and was trying to get a diagnosis, as Noah said. So what's been interesting for me is watching a little bit of the resistance at the beginning, and then they're texting me at the end. Or the models saying, I would do this for free because of how much information you have given me. This is what Tight Lipped has done. And to give me the opportunity to stand in front of residents also, I think, has softened what you can hear my aggression. I'm from New Jersey. I'm a little aggressive, a little assertive, and a little frustrated. But when I saw people and really understood what their training was, it's about us coming together versus being PT, MD, and how to really tie these things together. And I think we all just need to have a little more grace with one another as we're in an increasing uphill battle with the healthcare systems that everybody's dealing with. And people are in various healthcare environments. Some physical therapists may have 15 minutes with the patient. I get an hour. Other people are everywhere in between, and also with inadequate training. And so what we want to try to do is be curious. Ask the questions. If you don't know the answer, say, I probably know who does. And let me help you try to figure it out. And that is what I feel the role of physical therapy can do. And it's been really great doing this with Tight Lipped and bringing everybody together.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I just want to give a huge thank you to both Dr. Rachel Rubin, who flew here all the way from DC to be here, especially for us. As Keena mentioned, she's the chair of, she's taking a selfie of us right now. She's the chair of our medical advisory board. She is incredible. Dr. Maria Uloko. We don't all need to take selfies together right now. Dr. Maria Uloko and Stephanie Prendergast are literally volunteering their time every week going and teaching at these hospitals that don't have anyone to teach this information. I cannot emphasize enough how they are, out of the just goodness of their hearts, trying to get OBGYN residents this information so that there are doctors who and Kayna, who also traveled all the way here, who is an incredible mental health professional. And there are not enough therapists in the country who understand what vulvovaginal and pelvic pain are. And so there's a huge, huge need for more people to be also educating people in the mental health profession. So thank you, Keena, for doing that. I also want to thank our event sponsors, OMG Yes and Soul Source Dilators and MedRoots. If you did not stop there on your way in, I encourage everyone to head to the table, the sponsor tables at the front of the house, and you can check out more information about that there. And I also want to give a huge, huge thank you to Keena for literally putting everything together and speaking at the beginning. She's inside, you can't hear her. And all of the many tight-lipped volunteers, you will meet them, find them with these buttons on, who are putting in time every single week on top of trying to figure out their own conditions, on top of trying to get the healthcare that they deserve. They're also fighting for people around the city of LA to be able to get the care that they need and deserve. And the tight-lipped patients are literally spending as many hours as humanly possible trying to make that happen. And lastly, I want to thank Nina and Jerry, who hosted this beautiful event in their home. Have graciously, generously given us their home for this event and brought many of their close friends and people here. And so we will wrap up in another minute. And I do really want to encourage people to stick around and get to talk to each other, get to meet each other, get to ask questions, any questions you might have of our panelists who will be here, and really get a chance to talk more. Before we wrap up, I want to say that there are many ways that you can support the work that we're doing. And the most important one is that we do need people to donate to our work. We are a small, scrappy organization. This entire organization has 2 staff members, myself and Oren, who's waving at the back of the room. The only reason we are able to do this work is because of our amazing, incredible volunteers and chapters and medical advisory board members. And we have been able to get into 15 teaching hospitals on literally a shoestring budget and just like blood, sweat, and tears. And we don't want to only be in 15 teaching hospitals. We want to see OBGYN education change across the country. It shouldn't be that only if you happen to be at a patient at USC, at CAC LA General Hospital, you can get this education, and you're a resident, you can get this education. As a patient there, you can see a provider. You should be able to go to any hospital in the entire country and know that you're going to have an OBGYN who's been trained in vulvovaginal pain and knows how to diagnose and treat you. But in order for us to expand the work that we're doing, in order for us to get to every teaching hospital, in order for us to reach the OBGYNs who are not self-selecting to get this education, they don't even know what they don't know, right? They don't know that there's information that they're missing. In order to do that, we do need funding in order to have a bigger staff, in order to build our chapters, in order to build trainings and education programs. And like Maria said, we are going in and sometimes doing the work of the residency program for them. There are volunteers here who have literally gotten in the weeds of the logistics of how do you run tech for a didactic lecture at a residency program. Unfortunately, even though that is very much not the responsibility of patients, that is a task that we take on because we want to make this happen. But in order to do this kind of thing on a daily and weekly basis, we need funding. So I would really encourage everyone here to come up at the end of this panel. We will have a computer and phone set up here for donations. You can come up and ask us any questions that you have. Oren, who's back there, can help guide people through that. And really, really appreciate all of you being here and caring and taking the time to learn about this issue.
I love that Noah says that they're small and scrappy, because I think that might be my whole brand. And so the reality is when you donate to a big organization, your money doesn't go very far. This is a startup of the most beautiful sense. This is making actual change, even just volunteers. Can you imagine what it is going to be like to pour a little gas on this fire? And so personally, I love watching the work happen. It's addicting. I have donated to Tight Lip every single year, and I will continue to do so. So I don't just donate my time, I donate money. I'm going to donate even more money because I was just put off a big course to teach doctors how to prescribe hormone therapy. Doctors don't know how to write estrogen prescriptions. They don't know how to prescribe vaginal hormones. They may they like the idea of it. They don't know how to write the prescriptions. So I created a course where it was just like, here, just watch this. I'll teach you how to do everything. I'll just really short, just teach you how to write the prescriptions, why to do it, how to talk to patients, because this is half the population. And so a proceeds of those the course money is going to go to Tight Lipped, because it's going to then fuel even more change. And so I ask you today, as the clinicians in the room, you do this work every day, donate this money, because the other programs need to benefit from this too. Even a small amount will go so far to actually changing the world, and you get that on your heart, on your soul, to feel like we are making a change. And sometimes it's hard to get out of bed in the morning with everything going on in the world today. So just the fact that you came here, donate your time, donate your money, talk to people about this, spread the message, and what an amazing event. To our hosts, to our sponsors, to Tight Lipped, thank you so much for having us all today.